you are seeing is, without exaggeration, the most unsettling piece of Bigfoot footage to come out of Asia in years. Somebody sent me this clip after my previous Yeran video. A few seconds long, filmed at night, in the snow, deep in a forest in central China. But this isn't just another Bigfoot video. This is a man who caught something on a trail camera he had no business catching. And then, instead of just walking away, he went back into that forest to find it.
This is a story of what he found, what found him, and why, as far as anyone can tell, he was never quite the same again. So stay with me. Take everything you're about to see with a healthy grain of salt. I'm going to be honest with you the whole way through about what we can and can't prove. But if this is real, it changes everything. Now, before we go one step further, I owe you some honesty. I didn't film it. I've never met the man who did. And the place it came from is exactly the kind of place you should be suspicious of. Because here's the thing about this footage. It didn't come from a news station. It didn't come from a scientist or a documentary crew or anybody with a name and a reputation to protect. It came from a corner of the Chinese internet that most people, even in China, never see. A small, half-forgotten forum for people obsessed with one thing, the wild man. A place where hunters, hikers, insomniacs, and true believers post grainy photos and swear up and down that something is living in the mountains that science refuses to admit exists. If you've spent any time in the American Bigfoot world, you already know these places. Every country that has a monster in its forests has a website like this. A little digital campfire where the stories get passed around, embellished, argued over, and occasionally, just occasionally, backed up by something that makes you sit up straight. In the States, we've got dozens of them. What most people in the West don't realize is that China has them too, and the creature they're all whispering about has been whispered about for a very, very long time. Let's start with where this came from. The footage first surfaced in the opening weeks of 2026, posted to one of those Chinese cryptid boards I mentioned, a low-traffic forum devoted almost entirely to sightings of the country's most famous unexplained creature. The thread had maybe a few hundred views when it started. Within days, it had thousands, and by the time the screenshots and re-uploads spread far enough to reach me, the original post had already been quietly taken down. That happens a lot with this stuff, which, depending on how you look at it, is either a red flag or the whole point. The man who posted it wasn't a monster hunter. That matters, so I want to be clear about it. From what we can piece together, he was an amateur wildlife photographer in his 30s, living in a small village on the edge of one of the most remote forest regions in central China. His whole thing was trail cameras. He'd hike out, strap cheap, motion-triggered cameras to trees, leave them for a week or two, and come back to see what wandered past. Wild boar, muntjac, those little barking deer, foxes. Now and then, if he was lucky, one of the rare golden snub-nosed monkeys that live up in those hills. Beautiful animals, blue faces, orange fur, worth real money to the right buyer. That was his hobby, and a little bit his side income. Ordinary stuff, cold fingers, long hikes, memory cards full of empty snow. It's worth painting the region a little, because the geography is a character in this story whether you believe the rest of it or not. This is the kind of place that barely exists in the modern world anymore. Folded, mountainous forest that runs on for mile after mile with almost no roads through the heart of it. Valleys that hold their fog until noon. Ridge lines that vanish into cloud. Villages sit at the edges of it, small and old. The sort of places where people still hunt and forage and where the grandparents can tell you things about the mountains that never made it into any book. In winter, the whole world up there goes white and silent, and the population of humans in any given square mile drops to just about zero. If you wanted to design a place on Earth where a large, shy animal could survive for centuries without ever being definitively caught, you would draw something very close to this. It's not a metaphor for the unknown. It genuinely, physically is unknown in a way almost nowhere else in a country of 1 billion+ people still manages to be. His early posts on the forum were about as boring as it gets, and honestly, that's part of why people believed him. He wasn't showing up screaming about monsters, he was complaining. One of his cameras had gone missing, just gone, mount and all, ripped clean off a tree about 8 feet up, which he couldn't explain because there was nothing up there strong enough to do that. He posted about strange tracks in the snow that he couldn't match to any animal he knew. And he was a guy who knew his animals. He asked pretty casually whether anyone else running cameras in the region had lost equipment lately. He wasn't building a story, he was asking for help. And then he went quiet for a few days, and when he came back, he posted the clip. He didn't hype it up. His words translated were something close to, "I don't know what this is. I've been filming animals up here for 6 years. I've never seen anything like this. Can someone tell me I'm wrong?" That was it. And then he attached 10 seconds of footage that, once you see it, you don't forget. And I want to linger on that for a second because it's the detail that separates the believable stories from the obvious ones. The people who fake this stuff come in loud. They come in with a narrative already built, a dramatic caption, a call for the clip to go viral. They tell you how to feel about it before you've even watched it. This man did the opposite. He came in confused. He came in almost embarrassed, like a guy who'd found something he wasn't equipped to explain and was hoping the crowd would hand him a boring answer so he could stop thinking about it. That instinct, please, someone, tell me this is nothing, is not the instinct of a hoaxer, it's the instinct of a witness. And in 6 years of running cameras across that region, he had built up exactly the kind of local knowledge that makes a witness credible. He knew what a boar looked like at night on infrared. He knew the difference between a fox's eyeshine and a deer's. He knew his own trails, his own trees, his own equipment. This wasn't a tourist who got spooked by a shadow. This was a man who knew that forest intimately, telling a room full of strangers that for the first time in 6 years, the forest had shown him something it had no name for. Here it is. I want you to watch the base of the snow-covered tree on the right side of the frame. Watch the dark gap underneath it. Give it a few seconds, and there. You see it move. Let me play it again, slower this time, because there's a lot happening in a very small window. The camera is a night vision trail cam, so everything is in that grainy gray-green wash. In the foreground, snow, clean, untouched, maybe a foot deep. On the left, a couple of thin tree trunks, and tucked into the base of a big snow-laden spruce, there's a dark hollow. A den. At first you'd swear it's just shadow. Then the shape inside the shadow shifts, and a head comes up into the light. And it's the face that does it. This is not a bear. I've looked at a lot of bears on trail cams, and I know what a black bear looks like when it turns toward a camera, and this is not that. The face is broad and flat, almost human in its proportions. Deep-set eyes, a heavy brow, a wide, flat nose, and this shaggy mane of hair framing the whole thing. The eyes catch the infrared and they glow, the way animal eyes do at night. And it looks not past the camera, not around it, it looks straight into the lens. For about 2 full seconds, this thing makes eye contact with the camera, with you. Then, and this is the detail I keep coming back to, it doesn't panic. It doesn't bolt. A deer hits a camera flash and it's gone in a white blur. This thing simply lowers its head and withdraws, slow and deliberate, back into the dark of the den until the hollow is empty again, and all you're left with is snow and a black gap under a tree. It didn't flee, it retreated. Like it had decided it was done being looked at. And if you've ever locked eyes with a wild animal that's bigger than you and completely unbothered by you, you know exactly why that's the scariest possible version of this. So let's do the responsible thing and try to tear it apart. Could it be a bear? I've said it. The face is wrong. The posture is wrong. Black bears in that region den up, but they don't sit and stare like that. Could it be one of the golden monkeys? No chance. Those animals are the size of a medium dog, and the scale of the head against that tree trunk puts this thing at easily 2 meters. Could it be a man in a suit? Out there, in that snow, in that cold, miles from the nearest road, in the dead of a Chinese winter, on the off chance a random trail cam would trigger? Maybe. People fake these things, and we'll come back to that at the end, honestly. But whoever this uploader was, he wasn't selling anything. He deleted it, he didn't monetize it, he asked to be told he was wrong, and nobody could tell him he was. There's one more thing in the clip I want you to notice, because it's the kind of detail a hoaxer almost never thinks to include. Watch the breath in that cold on that camera. You can just make out the fog of the creature's breath around its face. Slow, heavy, regular. It's alive, it's warm-blooded, and it's calm. Its breathing doesn't quicken when it sees the camera. Costumes don't breathe like that. A man in a suit in that cold would be gasping, fogging up, shifting his weight to stay warm. This thing is settled, comfortable, at rest in a snow den in sub-zero cold, the way only something built for that environment can be. And then look at the hands, or the one hand you can partly see at the lip of the den, resting on the snow. It's dark, it's furred to the knuckle, and the fingers are long. Not paws, not hooves. Fingers spread flat against the ground, bearing weight the way a knuckle-walking primate bears weight. I have frozen this clip on that hand more times than I can count, and every time the same thought. That is not the anatomy of anything that's supposed to be up there.
Now here's where I have to correct myself and correct the title of this video a little bit. I called it the Chinese Bigfoot because that's the closest thing we have in English. And honestly, that's what it looks like. But over there, they don't call it Bigfoot. They've got their own name for it. And it's a lot older than America. They call it the Yeren, which means the wild man.
Yeren, 2 syllables. It translates more or less to wild man or savage man. And unlike Bigfoot, which really only entered the popular imagination in the last 70 years or so, the Yeren has been part of Chinese life for centuries. We're not talking about a modern campfire story. We're talking about a creature that shows up in old regional records, in mountain village legends passed down through more generations than anyone can count, in classical texts that describe tall, hair-covered, man-like beings living in the deep forests, avoiding people, strong enough to be dangerous and smart enough to stay hidden. And the descriptions, this is the part that got under my skin, the descriptions are remarkably consistent across hundreds of years and hundreds of miles. Witnesses going back generations describe the same animal again and again, tall, well over the height of a man, often reported at 2 meters or more, covered in hair, and this is the detail that comes up constantly, reddish hair. A reddish-brown or rust-colored coat, walking upright on 2 legs like a person, a face that people describe as caught somewhere between a human and an ape, flat, broad with a heavy brow and deep eyes, long arms, a powerful build, and a habit of appearing at the edge of the trees, staring, and then simply melting back into the forest. Now go back and look at that trail cam face again. The mane, the flat, human-ish features, the reddish tint the infrared can't quite hide in the fur around its shoulders, the size against the tree, the way it stared and then withdrew. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm just telling you that a hobbyist photographer with a cheap camera out in the snow captured something that matches a description Chinese villagers have been repeating since long before anyone in that country had ever heard the word Sasquatch. Either he faked it using folklore he happened to know by heart, or he filmed the folklore itself. Think about how strange that consistency really is. Folklore drifts. Stories change in the retelling. A dragon in one village becomes a serpent 2 valleys over, then a demon, then a god. That's how legends normally behave. They mutate. But the Yeren doesn't mutate much. Whether you're reading an account from a mountain hamlet, a report from a forestry worker, or a story a grandmother tells her grandchildren, the core stays weirdly fixed. Tall, reddish, upright, hair-covered, human-faced, shy but not harmless. When a legend refuses to drift like that, when the details stay locked in place across centuries and across people who never met, folklorists start to wonder whether the reason the description is so stable is that everyone's describing the same real thing. That's not proof. Plenty of stable legends are still just legends, but it's the kind of pattern that makes you lean in instead of laughing it off. There's also the matter of behavior, and this is where the folklore and the footage start to rhyme in a way I find genuinely hard to shake. The old stories don't describe a rampaging beast. They describe something cautious, something that watches from the tree line and then withdraws, something that avoids people, that's curious about them from a distance but wants no part of a confrontation, that will circle a camp at night and be gone by morning without ever being seen. It's the psychology of an intelligent animal that has learned over a very long time that the safest thing to do around humans is to stay just out of reach. Now put that next to the clip. The thing in the den didn't charge. It didn't flee in blind panic. It looked, it assessed, and it chose to withdraw, the exact behavior the legends describe, performed on camera by something that, if it's a hoax, was staged by a person who understood Yeren folklore well enough to get the psychology right, not just the costume. And there's one region more than any other where these stories cluster. One stretch of mountains and old-growth forest so remote, so tangled, so thinly populated that the Yeren legend never faded there the way old legends usually do. It's a place of steep ridges and deep valleys, of fog and snow and forest so dense the sunlight barely reaches the floor. For decades, it's been the beating heart of the wild man mystery. And it is exactly the kind of place where a man could strap a camera to a tree and catch something that shouldn't exist. It's also exactly the kind of place where a man could walk in one afternoon and not walk back out. You'd think that catching something like that on camera would be enough, that you'd post it, let the internet argue about it, and stay warm at home. But that's not what he did, and to understand why, you have to understand what the footage did to him, because he told us, in his own posts over the days that followed, he couldn't let it go. That's the honest summary. He wrote that he wasn't sleeping, that he'd watch the 10 seconds over and over, freezing it on the face, zooming in until the grain dissolved into meaningless static, then zooming back out. He kept asking the same questions in the thread. How big do you think it is? Does the face look real to you? Has anyone seen tracks like the ones I posted? He was, by his own description, obsessed. An obsession does a very specific thing to people. It makes the smart, safe, obvious choice, leave it alone, feel unbearable. He didn't want to wonder for the rest of his life. He wanted to know. There was also a practical excuse, and I think the excuse mattered to him because it let him tell himself this was reasonable. Remember, he still had a second camera out there, one of the ones near the den site. If the creature was still in the area, that camera might have caught more, better angles. Daylight, maybe, clearer footage. In his mind, he wasn't going back to confront a monster. He was going back to collect a memory card. That's the story he told himself, and honestly, that's the story a lot of us would tell ourselves. It's never, I'm gonna do something dangerous. It's always just one small errand. And I think there's something almost universal in that, something worth naming, because it's the quiet engine under this whole story. We like to imagine that if we ever saw real proof of something impossible, we'd do the sensible thing. We'd report it. We'd step back. We'd let the experts handle it. But that's not how curiosity works on a person. Real proof of the impossible doesn't make you cautious. It makes you hungry. It opens a door in your mind that you cannot unopen, and every hour on the other side of that door is an hour you're not thinking about anything else. He had spent 6 years pointing cameras at empty snow, hoping for something worth seeing, and then, one night, the forest finally answered him. Of course he went back. In a way, he'd been walking back toward that den for 6 years before he ever knew it was there. The footage didn't create his obsession, it just gave it a location. His wife told him not to go. He wrote that too, almost in passing, and it's one of the lines that stuck with me. She didn't want him back up there, whether that was a gut feeling or just common sense about a man hiking alone into a remote forest in deep winter chasing something that had ripped a camera off a tree. We don't know, but she told him not to go, and he went anyway. He waited for a break in the weather, packed his gear, and set out alone later in the day than he probably should have, with snow forecast and the light already starting to slide toward evening. Every single one of those decisions is the kind that seems fine at the time and looks like a warning in hindsight. That was the mistake. Not one big one, a handful of small ones stacked up, all pointing the same direction, deeper into the trees. From what he wrote afterward, and from the footage that eventually came off his devices, we can put together a rough picture of that hike. He went in along a route he knew, the same one he'd used to place the cameras, familiar ground. And at first, he said, it was just cold and quiet and normal. The particular silence of a snowy forest, where the snow eats every sound, and your own breathing seems too loud. But the deeper he went, the more that silence started to bother him, because it got total. He noticed there were no birds, no rustling, none of the small background noise a forest always has, even in winter. The little movements of little animals going about their day. Anyone who spends real time in the wild will tell you about this, and it comes up in Bigfoot encounter reports over and over all around the world in completely different cultures who've never spoken to each other. Right before something happens, the woods go dead quiet. The small animals know something big is nearby, and they shut up and they hide. He walked into that silence, and in his words, the back of his neck started to prickle. The feeling of being watched, not seeing anything, just feeling it. Then he reached the first camera, one of the ones on the way in, and something was wrong with it. It had moved, not fallen, not knocked loose by snow, moved. It was pointed in a different direction than he'd left it, turned to face a new angle, as if something had taken an interest in it and swiveled it around to look at it or look past it. He stood there in the snow trying to make that make sense, and the honest answer is it didn't make sense, not with any animal he knew. He said he almost turned around right there, almost, but the den site and the second camera, the one that might have the real footage, was close now. So he kept going, just a little further, just one more errand. And here's a detail that I think is easy to skip past, but shouldn't be, because it tells you something about what he was dealing with. A curious animal knocks a camera down. A bear cuffs it, chews on it, drags it off. You find it in the snow, scratched up on the ground. This camera wasn't on the ground. It was still mounted, still fixed to the tree, and simply aimed somewhere new. That takes hands. That takes something with the dexterity to grip a small device and rotate it deliberately without ripping it loose, and the curiosity to want to. That's not a bear. That's not a boar. That's something that looked at a strange object a human had left in its forest and investigated it the way we would by turning it to see it better. And if you're the man standing in front of that re-aimed camera in the fading light, that realization is so much worse than a broken one on the ground. Because a broken camera means an animal passed through. A re-aimed camera means something was thinking. And then he came to the place from the clip, the big spruce, the hollow underneath it, the den. And it was empty, but it had not been empty for long. The snow around the opening was packed down and matted, trampled by something heavy that had come and gone more than once. Inside the hollow there was a depression, a nest-like scoop worn into the ground and lined with broken branches and needles sheltered from the wind. It was a bed. Something slept there, and standing at the mouth of it, alone with the light failing and the snow starting to come down, he realized he was standing in the doorway of something's home. This is the part of these stories where things either fall apart or get much worse, and in his case, they got worse. Because once he was really looking, once his eyes adjusted from staring at that den to reading the ground around it, the signs were everywhere, and they were not subtle. The tracks came first, prints in the crusted snow, and they were huge, far too long and far too wide to be a man's boot, far too big for a bear walking flat-footed. Human in shape, roughly, 5 toes, a heel, an arch. But the size was all wrong, pressed deep into snow that held his own weight without much of a dent, which meant whatever left them was heavy, really heavy. And when he followed a few of them, the stride, the distance from one print to the next, was longer than he could match, even lunging. You can fake a single footprint by carving a stamp. It's a lot harder to fake a natural walking stride across uneven ground spaced further apart than a tall man can step. He photographed them next to his own boot for scale. His boot looked like a child's. Then the trees around the den site, saplings were snapped, not sawn, not cut, snapped, the way a green branch breaks when something big just shoves through and doesn't care. Some were bent and twisted at heights well above his own head, and in a couple of places, branches were arranged in those crossed, deliberate-looking formations that people in the Bigfoot world obsess over, the so-called tree structures. Skeptics say they're just natural deadfall and wishful thinking, and a lot of the time, honestly, they probably are. But standing there in that specific place with those specific tracks around him, he didn't read them as random, he read them as marking, as if he'd wandered into a space that belonged to something and the something had left signs of ownership all around its border. And then the smell. He described a strong, rank odor that hung around the den, a thick animal musk, wet and rotten, like a wet dog crossed with something dead. This is maybe the single most consistent detail in Bigfoot and Yeren encounter reports across the entire world. Again and again from people who've never read another report in their life. The smell. An overpowering stench that arrives before the creature does. He smelled it, and it was fresh, and that meant the source was close. And that's the moment, standing in the trampled snow, boot next to a footprint twice its size, surrounded by snapped trees, in a cloud of that smell, with the light almost gone, that he noticed the tracks around him didn't just come and go in a line, they looped, they circled the area, they went around him. Something had walked a slow circle around the place where he was standing, and the freshest ones hadn't been there when he arrived. Sit with what that actually means, because it's the hinge the whole story turns on. He had walked in following old tracks laid down before he got there. But somewhere in the time he'd spent crouched at that den, reading the ground, photographing prints, telling himself he was just there to grab a memory card, something had come. Something had walked a wide, unhurried loop around him while his back was turned and his attention was on the snow. It hadn't attacked. It hadn't announced itself. It had simply encircled him quietly, and then, going by where the freshest prints led, settled somewhere at the edge of that circle to watch. He had come all this way to find the thing on his camera, and the thing on his camera had led him. It had watched him walk into the middle of its home, and then it had closed the door behind him. He wasn't the observer anymore. He was the one being observed, and he'd been the one being observed for a while, and he had only just figured it out. That is the precise instant, I think, where investigation ended and survival began. Now I need to pull us out of that forest for a few minutes, because if you're a reasonable person, there's a question forming in your head right about now, and it's a fair one. If this creature is real, why hasn't anyone serious ever looked into it? And the answer is they have. That's the part almost nobody outside China knows. This isn't just campfire stuff. At various points, the Yeren was taken seriously enough that real resources got thrown at finding it. Start with the witnesses, because they are not all wide-eyed villagers. Some of the most striking Yeren reports came from exactly the kind of people you'd want as witnesses: local officials, teachers, workers, whole groups of them at once, seeing the same thing at the same time in broad daylight. There are accounts of a creature crossing a mountain road at close range in front of multiple people, described the same way every time. Tall, upright, covered in reddish hair with a broad, half-human face, moving on two legs before disappearing into the trees. When you get several people of different backgrounds independently describing the same animal in the same terms villagers used a century earlier, that's harder to wave away as one person's imagination. And then there were the expeditions. This is the detail I really want you to sit with, because it's true and it's astonishing. China actually mounted large, organized scientific expeditions into these mountains specifically to hunt for the Yeren. Not two guys with a camera, serious efforts, with real manpower, scientists and guides and support, combing the forests, interviewing witnesses, casting footprints, and collecting physical samples. They came back with hair, tufts of coarse reddish hair recovered from the areas where the creature had been reported. And when that hair was examined, the reports were maddeningly inconclusive. It didn't cleanly match a bear, it didn't cleanly match a known monkey or ape. It sat in this frustrating gap that nobody could fully close. They collected footprint casts far larger than any human foot. They gathered decades of consistent eyewitness testimony, and they never produced the one thing that would have ended the argument forever: a body. No captured specimen, no bones, just hair and prints, and hundreds of people swearing they saw the same impossible thing. And think about why a body has never turned up, because skeptics love to swing that around as the knockout blow. No body, no creature, case closed. But stop and consider the arithmetic of it. This is some of the most rugged, least traveled forest in all of China. Animals that die out there die in dense cover, in ravines, under snow, and they are found and stripped and scattered by scavengers within days. We lose the bodies of known animals in country like that all the time. We know bears and leopards live there, and we still almost never stumble on their remains. Now imagine a creature that is rare to begin with, intelligent, and apparently very good at avoiding people even while it's alive. The odds of a hiker happening across its corpse are almost nil. Absence of a body in a place like that isn't evidence the thing doesn't exist. It's exactly what you'd expect whether it exists or not, which is maddening because it means the one piece of proof that would settle this is also the one piece the landscape itself is designed to swallow. And that, in a strange way, is the whole tragedy of the Yeren. It sits in this permanent gray zone, too well documented to dismiss, too poorly proven to accept. Hundreds of witnesses, but no specimen. Hair that doesn't match but doesn't quite prove. Footprints by the dozen, but a footprint is just a shape in the mud. Every generation, someone gets close. Someone sees it cross a road or finds a track, or now catches 10 seconds of it on a cheap camera in the snow. And every generation, it slips back into the trees before the proof can be nailed down. And the whole thing resets, and the mystery rolls forward into the next set of hands. This man was just the newest set of hands. He got closer than almost anyone before him. And then the pattern held, the way it always holds. So when a quiet hobbyist with a trail camera posted 10 seconds of a reddish, upright, flat-faced creature staring out of a snow den and asked to be told he was wrong, he wasn't the first person in that region to make that claim. He was just the latest in a line that stretches back centuries, and if the footage is what it appears to be, possibly the closest anyone had gotten to it in a very long time. Which brings us back to him, alone in the dark, in the snow, realizing that the tracks around him had made a circle. Because whatever those expeditions had spent years failing to find, he had walked straight into the middle of it. By now the light was gone. Whatever margin of daylight he'd had when he reached the den had bled out into that flat, blue-gray darkness you get in a snowy forest at night, where everything glows faintly and nothing has edges. And he needed to leave. He knew he needed to leave. But when he turned to go back the way he came, he couldn't find the way. This is the next piece of footage, and it's him now, his own camera, handheld, turning in a slow circle. And you can watch it happen in real time. He pans across the trees, once looking for the landmark, the gap, the slope he came down. Then again faster, the same wall of black trunks and gray snow in every direction, no path, no tracks he can trust. Because the snow that's been falling has softened everything and his own trail is going or gone. And then he says it, quietly, almost to himself. There's a particular kind of fear in that clip that I don't think you can fake, and it's got nothing to do with monsters. It's the fear of scale. When you get lost in real wilderness at night, the thing that breaks you isn't a predator. It's the sudden, total understanding of how small you are and how little the forest cares. The trees don't end. The dark doesn't lift. Every direction is the same wrong direction. And your own tracks, the thread that connects you to warmth and safety and home, are being quietly erased by the snow while you watch. You can hear all of that landing on him in the space of a few seconds. The confidence of a man in his own woods draining out, replaced by the small, cold voice of someone who has just done the math and realized the math doesn't work. Womi Lule in Mandarin. It means simply, I'm lost. That's all. He doesn't shout it. He doesn't narrate a big dramatic realization. He just says it under his breath, the way you'd say it if the truth of it had only just landed on you. I'm lost. And if you listen to how he says it, there's something already wrong in his voice. It's not the frustration of a man who's taken a wrong turn on a familiar trail. It's smaller and tighter than that. It's the voice of a man who has understood all at once that he is alone, in the dark, in deep snow, at the edge of something's territory, and he does not know which way is out. Let me run it back slowed down because there are things in the background of this clip that people argue about. Watch the tree line behind him as the camera swings past, right about there. Is that a shape between the trunks, darker than the dark around it? Or is that just the grain, just the mind doing what the mind does in the dark, assembling a monster out of shadow and noise? Honestly, I can't tell you for certain. I've watched it more times than I'd like to admit, and some nights I'm sure there's something there, and some nights I'm sure there's nothing. but he clearly felt it. Because right after he says he's lost, the calm search turns into something else. He stops looking for the way out, and he starts moving fast. And I want to be fair to the darkness here, because this is the part of the story a skeptic can most easily explain, and they'd have a point. Getting lost in a snowy forest at night is not paranormal. It's ordinary, and it's deadly, and it kills experienced outdoorsmen every single winter with no monster required. Fresh snow erases your trail. Darkness flattens every landmark into the same black wall. Panic sets in, and panic makes you walk in circles, and cold makes you stupid before you even realize you're in trouble. Everything on this clip, the disorientation, the tight voice, the quickening breath, could be a man in the early stages of being genuinely mortally lost, with nothing behind him but his own fear. I know that. You should hold on to that. But here's what that reasonable explanation has to account for, and can't quite. He wasn't a tourist. This was his forest. He had walked these exact routes for 6 years. Men don't get hopelessly turned around in their own backyard in the space of an afternoon unless something has knocked their judgment off its rails, unless fear got into the driver's seat first. Something scared him before he got lost. The getting lost was what the fear did to him. And this is the last clip. This is the one that's hard to watch, not because of what it shows, but because of what it doesn't. It's just running. The camera's in his hand, pointed more or less forward, and everything is chaos. The frame bouncing violently with every stride, snow and tree trunks whipping past, the ground lurching up and down, the whole world reduced to a strobing gray blur. He's not filming anymore. Not really, he's just running, and the camera happens to be recording. Let me play it one more time, and this time don't watch the center, watch the left edge of the frame, and listen. Listen to the breathing. It's ragged, panicked, the breathing of someone running for their life and not pacing themselves because they can't. Because whatever's behind them isn't giving them the option. You don't hear words, you don't hear him narrate. You just hear the breath and the crunch of snow, and if you turn it up underneath all of it, other sounds that are harder to place. And the thing your eyes keep doing the whole time is searching the edges of the frame for whatever he's running from. And the camera never gives it to you. It never turns around. You never see it, which I promise you is so much worse than if you did. Because a monster you can see is a monster you can measure. You can judge it, debunk it, decide it's a guy in a suit. But a thing you can only hear, a thing that stays exactly one turn of the camera behind a terrified man sprinting through the dark. Your brain fills that in with something far worse than any costume. The clip doesn't end on a reveal. It doesn't end on a scream or a fall or a face. It just ends. The footage cuts out mid-stride, and he's still running, and then there's nothing. Black. And that's the last thing any of us has from that night in the forest. And notice what the running clip quietly confirms about everything that came before it. All that talk about the silence, the circling tracks, the feeling of being watched, you could dismiss all of it as a nervous man narrating his own imagination. But you don't sprint like this from your imagination. You don't drop the pretense of filming, abandon the whole reason you came, and pour every bit of energy you have into blind flight because you talked yourself into a bad mood. The body doesn't lie the way the voice can. This is a man whose animal brain has taken over and made one decision, get away now, and is spending everything to carry it out. Whatever crossed the line from a feeling into a fact for him, it happened in the gap between the lost clip and this one, off camera, in the dark. We don't get to see it. We only get to see what it did to him. And what it did to him was turn a careful, experienced woodsman into pure prey.
So what happened to him? I wish I had a clean answer for you, but I do not. Nobody does, and that's exactly why this story has spread the way it has. Because it just stops hard right at the worst possible moment, and it never picks back up.
Here's what we can actually say. After the night that footage was filmed, his posts on the forum stopped. The man who had been posting almost every day, asking questions, uploading photos, chasing the thing, went silent. And into that silence, the internet did what the internet always does. It filled the gap with theories. And you can find all of them if you go looking. And there's no way to know which one is true. Some people say the simplest thing, and the simplest thing is probably the most likely, that he made it out. That he found his way to a road or a ridgeline he recognized, got home cold and shaking, and was so badly frightened by whatever happened that he wanted nothing more to do with any of it. That he deleted the original post, walked away from the forum, and decided the smartest thing he could do was never speak about it again. In this version, he's fine, physically, and just done. Done with cameras, done with the forest, done with the Yaren, and you know what? That would still be a chilling ending. A man scared so completely out of a hobby he'd loved for years that he erased it. And I'll tell you which version I lean toward, not because I can prove it, but because you've been honest enough to sit through the whole thing with me, so you deserve my honest read. I think he probably lived. I think the most likely story is the least cinematic one, that he ran until his lungs gave out, that the thing let him go the way it had let him come, that he broke out of the trees somewhere near dawn, half frozen and hollow-eyed, and that the man who came out of that forest was not the same man who walked in. Because that's the part I do believe completely, regardless of what was chasing him. Something out there rewired him that night. You don't post every day for weeks and then go permanently, totally silent because you're bored. You go silent because you've been hollowed out. Whatever he saw or heard or felt at his back in that gap between the two clips, it was enough to make a man who loved those woods never speak of them again. And in a way, that's its own kind of ending. Not a body, not a rescue, just a door quietly closing on a life that used to have the forest in it. Other versions are darker. There are claims, and I want to be careful here, because claims are all they are, that someone connected to him surfaced later and said he'd come back changed, that he wouldn't talk about that night, that he wouldn't go near the tree line anymore. And there are the darkest threads of all, the ones that insist he didn't come back at all, that the running clip really is the last of him, that the reason the account went quiet is the worst reason an account ever goes quiet.
I can't confirm that, and I want to be as clear as possible as I can. I have no proof that any harm came to this man, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of a scarier video. But I also can't show you the post where he says he's okay, because as far as anyone has found, there isn't one.
And here's the thing that unsettles me most about the silence, more than any single theory. Whatever happened, the footage survived it. Somebody at some point pulled these 3 clips off his camera and his phone and put them where other people could find them. If he made it home and deleted everything in fear, then who saved the clips? And if he didn't make it home, then who went and got them? Either answer has a shadow on it. Either he saved the very footage he was supposedly too frightened to keep, or someone else recovered a missing man's last recordings and quietly let them loose on a forum before it, too, went dark. I don't have a clean way to square that. It's one of those loose threads that the longer you pull on it, the less comfortable you get. And then the thread itself came down. The original post, the footage, the whole discussion, deleted or removed depending on who you ask. Which is the point at which it stopped being one man's story and started being everyone's, copied and re-uploaded and passed hand to hand across the internet until it reached me, and now you. So here's where that leaves us. 3 clips, a face in a den, a man saying he's lost, a man running from something we never see, a username on a forum that doesn't exist anymore, and a forest that has been keeping this exact secret for 1,000 years and just kept it a little longer. All right, I promised you at the start that I'd be honest all the way through, so let's do the hard part. Let's talk about all the ways this could be complete nonsense. Because it could be. Let's be adults about it. We are living in 2026, and this is the single worst moment in human history to trust a video of anything. The tools to fake exactly this kind of footage, grainy, dark night vision, just clear enough to be convincing and just blurry enough to hide the seams, are on a laptop now, maybe on a phone. A short clip of a creature in a snowy den is squarely within reach of someone with the right software and a free weekend. That has to be on the table, and it belongs near the top of the list. And even without any of that, the old explanations still apply. It could be a costume, a good one, worn by someone patient and a little bit crazy, staged for a camera they knew would trigger. It could be misidentified wildlife pushed through low resolution and a scared imagination, a bear in an unusual posture, an animal at a strange angle, the human brain doing what it's brilliant at, which is finding a face in the noise. The moved camera, the tracks, the smell, every single one of those has a boring explanation if you want one badly enough. And the fact that the source vanished, the post got deleted, the account went quiet, a skeptic will tell you that's not mysterious at all. That's just what a hoax looks like after it served its purpose.
So now I want to hear from you. Watch that footage again, the face in the den, the man who says he's lost, the one who runs, and tell me in the comments, real or fake? What do you see in those trees that I might have missed? And if you've ever been out in deep woods, anywhere in the world, and felt that silence fall, and known in your gut that you were not alone. I really want to hear that story. Put it below and I will read it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.